Hello everyone. Welcome back again. As you find yourself back into that's the wrong screen. Back to the realm of Purgatorio. I think last we met, a lot of things happened. A lot of stuff happened. Dante climbed a mountain, got branded with 7 different P's on his forehead, talked with some very famous figures from history which are no longer famous. Okay, everything seems to be working. Great. Now, join me as we go back into Purgatorio, Canto 12. As oxen yoked proceed abreast, so I moved with that burdened soul as long as my kind pedagogue allowed me to. But when he said, leave him behind and go ahead, for here it's fitting that with wings and oars each urge his boat along with all his force. I drew my body up again, erect, that stance most suitable to man, and yet the thoughts I thought were still submissive, bent. Now I was on my way, and willingly I followed in my teacher's steps, and we together showed what speed we could command. He said to me, look downward, for the way will offer you some solace if you pay attention to the pavement at your feet. As on the lids of the pavement tombs, there are stone effigies of what the buried were before, so that the dead may be remembered. And there, when memory, inciting only the pious, has renewed their mourning, men are often led to shed their tears again. So did I see, but carved more skillfully, with greater sense of likeness, effigies on all the path protruding from the mountain. I saw, to one side of the path, one who had been created nobler than all other beings, falling lightning like from heaven. I saw upon the side a Briareus transfixed by the celestial shaft. He lay, ponderous, on the ground, in fatal cold. I saw Thymbraeus, I saw Mars and Pallas, still armed, as they surround Jove, their father, gazing upon the giants' scattered limbs. Hey, Damon, welcome on in. Welcome to Purgatory. I saw bewildered Nimrod at the foot of his great labor. Watching him were those of Shinar, who had shared his arrogance. Oh, Niobe, what tears afflicted me when, on that path, I saw your effigy among your slaughtered children, 7 and 7. Oh, Saul, you were betrayed there as one who had died on his own sword, upon Gilboa, which never after knew the rain, the dew. Oh, mad Arachne, I saw you already half spider, wretched on the ragged remnants of work that you had brought to your own hurt. O Rehoboam, you whose effigy seems not to menace there, and yet you flee by chariot, terrified, though none pursues. It also showed, that pavement of hard stone, how much Alcmaeon made his mother pay, the cost of the ill-omened ornament. It showed the children of Sennacherib as they assailed their father in the temple, then left him dead behind them as they fled. It showed the slaughter and the devastation wrought by Tomyris, when she taunted Cyrus. You thirsted after blood, which blood I fill you. It showed the rout of the Assyrians, sent reeling after Holofernes' death, and also showed his body, what was left. I saw Troy turned to the caverns into ashes. O Ilium, your effigy in stone. It showed you were there, so squalid, so cast down. What master of the brush or of the stylus had there portrayed such mashes, such outlines as would astonish all discerning minds? The dead seemed dead, and the alive alive. I saw a head bent, treading those effigies, as well as those who had seen those scenes directly. Now, sons of Eve, persist in arrogance, in a haughty stance. Do not let your eyes bend, lest you be forced to see your evil path. We had now circled round more of the mountain, and much more of the sun's course has been crossed, and my mind absorbed, had gauged. When he who always looked ahead insistently, as he advanced, begin, lift up your eyes. It's time to see these images aside. See there an angel hurrying to meet us, and also see the sixth of the handmaidens returning from her service to that day. Adorn your face and acts with reverence, that he be pleased to send us higher. Remember, today will never know another dawn. I was so used to his insistent warnings against the loss of time. Concerning that, his words to me could hardly be obscure. I have a recording of Architecture Principles of Operation. Yeah, if it's in the public domain and nobody will copyright strike me for it, sure, why not? That handsome creature came towards us. His clothes were white, and his aspect, he seemed like the trembling star that rises in the morning. He opened wide his arms, then spread his wings. He said, "Approach. The steps are close at hand. From this point on, one can climb easily." This invitation's answered by so few, O humankind, warned from the upward flight. Why are you driven back by wind so slight? I could do an ASMR reading of the Turbo Encabulator script, where the missile knows where it is, because it knows where it isn't. It knows this because it knows where it isn't. It takes... He led us to a cleft within the rock, and then he struck my forehead with his wing. That done, he promised me safe journeyings. As on the right, when one ascends the hill, where, over Rubacante's bridge, there stands the church that dominates the well-ruled city. The daring slope of the ascent is broken by steps that were constructed in an age where record books and measures could be trusted. So was the slope that plummets there so steeply down from the other ring made easier, but on this side and that, high rock encroaches. While we began to move in that direction, Beati Pauperis Spiritu was sung so sweetly, it cannot be told in words. How different were these entryways from those of hell, for here it is with song one enters, down there it is with savage lamentations. Now we ascend by the sacred stairs, but I seem to be much more light than I had been before along the level terrace. And at this I asked, "Master, tell me, what heavy weight has been lifted from me, so that I, in going, notice almost no fatigue?" He answered, "When the peas that still remain upon your brow, now almost all are faint, have been completely, like this pea, erased. Your feet will be so mastered by goodwill that they not only will not feel travail, but will delight when they are urged uphill." Then I behaved like those who make their way with something on their head of which they are not aware, till others' signs make them suspicious, at which the hand helps them to ascertain. It seeks and finds and touches and provides the services that sight cannot supply. So, with my right hand's outspread fingers, I found just 6 of the letters once inscribed by him who holds the keys upon my forehead. And as he watched me do this, my guide smiled. Purgatorio, Canto 13. We now had reached the summit of the stairs where once again the mountain whose ascent delivers man from his sin had been indented. There, just as in the case of the first terrace, a second terrace runs around the slope, except that it describes a sharper arc. No effigy is there, and no outline. The bank is visible, the naked path only the livid color of raw rock. Pardon me. If we wait here in order to inquire of those who pass, the poet said, I fear our choice of path may be delayed too long. And then he fixed his eyes upon the sun, letting his right side serve to guide his movement. He wheeled his left around and changed direction. O gentle light, through trust in which I enter on this new path, may you conduct us here, he said, for men need guidance in this place. You warm the world that you illuminate. Unless a higher power urges us elsewhere, your rays must always be the guide that lead. We had already journeyed there as far as we should reckon here to be a mile, and done it in a brief time. Our will was eager, when we heard spirits as they flew towards us. Though they could not be seen, spirits pronouncing courteous invitations to love's table. The first voice that blew by called out aloud, Vinum na habent, and behind us that same voice reiterated its example. And as that voice drew further off, before it faded finally, another cried, I am Orestes. It too did not stop. What voices are these, father? Were my words. And as I asked him this, I heard a third voice say, Love those by whom you have been hurt. And my good master said, The sin of envy is scourged within the circle. Thus the cords that form the scourging lash are applied by love. The sounds of punished envy curbed, are different. If I judge right, you'll hear those sounds before we reach the pass of pardon. But let your eyes be fixed attentively, and through the air, you will see people seated before us, all of them on the stone terrace. I opened, wider than before, my eyes. I looked ahead of me, and I saw shades with cloaks that shared the color with the rocks. And once we moved a little further on, I heard the cry of, Mary, pray for us, and then heard Michael, Peter, and all saints. Think no man now walks upon the earth who is so hard that he would not have been pierced by the compassion for what I saw next. For when I had drawn close enough to see clearly the way they paid their penalty, the force of grief pressed tears out of my eyes. Those souls, it seemed, were cloaked in coarse haircloth. Another's shoulders served each shade as prop, and all of them were bolstered by the rocks. So do the blind who have to beg appear on pardon days to plead for what they need, each bending his head back and towards the other. That all who watch feel, quickly, pity's touch, not only through the words that would entreat, but through the sight, which can, no less, beseech. And just as to the blind no sun appears, so too the shades, of whom I now speak, here, the light of heaven would not give itself. For iron wire pierces and sews up the lids of all those shades, as untamed hawks are handled, lest, too restless, they fly off. It seemed to me a gross discourtesy for me, going to see and not be seen, therefore I turned to my wise counselor. He knew quite well that I, though mute, had meant, and thus he did not wait for my request, but said, Speak, and be brief and to the point. Virgil was to my right, along the outside, near the terrace edge. No parapet was there to keep a man from falling off. And to my other side were the devout shades. Through their eyes, soon sown so atrociously, those spirits forced the tears that bathed their cheeks. I turned to them and, You who can be certain, and then began, of seeing that high light, which is the only object of your longing, may in your conscience all impurity soon be dissolved by grace, so that the stream of memory flow through it limpidly. Tell me, for I shall welcome such dear words if any soul among you is Italian. If I know that, then I, perhaps, can help him. My brother, each of us is a citizen of one true city. What you meant to say was, one who lived in Italy as a pilgrim. My hearing placed the point from which this answer had come was somewhat ahead of me. Therefore, I made myself heard farther along. Moving, I saw one shade among the rest who looked expectant, and if any should ask how, His chin was lifted as a man's is. Spirit, I said, who have subdued yourself that you may climb. If it is you who answered, then let me know you by your place or name. I was a Sienese, she answered, and with others here I mend my wicked life, weeping to him that he grant us himself. I was not sapient, though I was called Sapia, and I rejoiced far more at others' hurts than my own good fortune. And lest you should think I have deceived you, hear and judge if I was not, as I have told you, mad when my year's arc had reached its downward part. My fellow citizens were close to Cole, where they joined battle with their enemies, and I prayed God for that which he had willed. There they were routed, beaten. They were reeling along the bitter paths of flight, and seeing that chase, I felt incomparable joy, so that I lifted up my daring face and cried out to God, "Now I fear you no more," as did the blackbird after brief fair weather. I looked for peace with God at my life's end. The penalty I owe for sin would not be lessened now by penitence at not one who was sorrowing for me because of charity in him. Pier Petinaio remembered me in his devout petitions. But who are you, who question our condition, as you move on, whose eyes, if I judge right, have not been sown, who uses breath to speak? My eyes, I said, will be denied me here, but only briefly. The offense of envy was not committed often by their gaze. I fear much more the punishment below. My soul is anxious, in suspense. Already I feel the heavy weights of the first terrace. And she, who then led you up here among us? Among us. If you believe you would return below, and I, he who is with me and is silent. I am alive, and therefore, chosen spirit, if you would have me move my mortal steps on your behalf beyond, ask me for that. Oh, this, she answered, is so strange a thing to hear. The sign is clear. You have God's love. Thus, help me sometime with your prayers. I ask of you, by that which you desire most, if you should ever tread the Tuscan earth, to see my name restored among my kin. You will see them among those vain ones who have put their trust in Telamone. Their loss and hope will be more than Diana cost, but their admirals will lose the most. Purgatorio, Canto 14. Who is this man who, although death had yet to grant him flight, can circle round our mountain, and can, at will, open and shut his eyes? I do not know who he is, but I do know he is not alone. You are closer. Question him and greet him gently, so that he replies. So were two spirits leaning towards each other, discussing me, along my right-hand side. Then they bent back their heads to speak to me, and one began, "O soul who, still enclosed within the body, make your way towards heaven. May you, through love, console us. Tell us who you are, from where you came, the grace that you've received. A thing that's never come to pass before, has caused us much astonishment." And I, through central Tuscany, there spreads a little stream first born in Falterona. 100 miles can't fill the course it needs. I bring this body from that river's banks. Tell you who I am would be to speak in vain. My name has not yet gained much fame. If, with my understanding, I have seized your meaning properly, replied to me the one who had spoken first. You mean the Arno. The other said to him, Why did he hide that river's name? Even as one would do in hiding something horrible from view. The shade to whom this question was addressed repaid with this. I do not know. but it is right for such a valley's name to perish. Far from its source, at which the rugged chain from which Perilous was cut off surpasses most other places with its massive mountains, until its end point, where it offers back those waters that evaporating skies drew out from the sea, that streams may be supplied. Virtue is seen as serpent, and all flee from it as if it were an enemy, either because the sight is ill-starred, or their evil custom goads them so. Therefore the nature of that squalid valley's people has changed, as if they were in Circe's pasture. That river starts his miserable course among foul hogs, more fit for acorns than for food devised to serve the needs of man. Then, as that stream descends, comes on curs that, through their forces feeble, snap and snarl. Scornful of them, it swears its snout away. And downward it flows on. And when that ditch, ill-fated and accursed, grows wider, it finds more and more the dogs becoming wolves. Descending then through many dark ravines, it comes on foxes so full of deceit, there is no trap that they cannot defeat. Nor will I keep from speech because my comrade hears me, and it will serve you, too, to keep in mind what prophecy reveals to me. I see your grandson. He's become a hunter of wolves along the banks of the fierce river, and he strikes every one of them with terror. He sells their flesh while they are still alive. Then, like an ancient beast, he turns to slaughter, depriving many of life, himself of honor. Bloody, he comes out from the wood he's plundered, leaving it such that in 1,000 years it would not be the forest that it was. Just as the face of one who has heard word of pain and injury becomes perturbed, no matter from what side that menace stirs, so did I see that other soul who turned to listen, growing anxious and dejected when he had taken his comrade's word. The speech of one, the aspect of the other, had made me need to know their names, and I both queried and beseeched at the same time, at which the spirit who had spoken first to me began again. You have me do for you that which, to me, you have refused. But since God would, and you, have his grace glow so brightly, I shall not be miserly. Know, therefore, that I was Guido del Duca. My blood was so afire with envy that, when I had seen a man becoming happy, the lividness in me was plain to see. What I've sown, this is the straw I reap. O humankind, why do you set your hearts there where our sharing cannot have a part? This is Rinieri. This is he, the glory, the honor of the house of Calboli. But no one has inherited its worth. It is not his kin alone, between the Po and mountains, and the Reno and the coast, who've lost the truth's grave good, and lost the good of gentle living, too. Those lands are full of poisoned stumps by now. However much one were to cultivate, it is too late. Where is the good Lizio? Arrigo Mainardi. Pier Traversaro. Guido di Carpigna. O Romagnoles returned to bastardy. When will a Fabro flourish in Bogo? When finds a Bernardine del Fosco in the noble offshoot of a humble plant. Don't wander, Tuscan. If I weep, then I remember Ugolino di Azzo, one who lived among us, and Guido de Prata, the house of Traversara, Anastagi, both houses without heirs, and Federigo Tignoso, his gracious company. The ladies and the knights, labors and leisure to which we once were urged by courtesy and love, where hearts now host perversity. O Bretonoro, why do you not flee when you have already lost your family and many men who have fled in iniquity. Bagnakava does well. It breeds no more. And Castrocuro ill, and Conio worse, for it insists on breeding counts so cursed. Once freed of their own demon, the Pagani will do quite well, but not so well that any will testify that they are pure and worthy. Your name, O Ugolin de Fantolini, is safe, since one no longer waits for heirs to blacken it with their degeneracy. But Tuscan, go your way. I am more pleased to weep now than to speak, for that which we have spoken presses heavily on me. We know those gentle souls have heard us move away, therefore their silence made us feel more confident about the path we took. When we, who'd gone ahead, were left alone, a voice that seemed like lightning as it split the air encountered us. A voice that said, "Whoever captures me will slaughter me," and then it fled like thunder when it fades, after the cloud is suddenly ripped through. As soon as that first voice had granted us a truce, another voice cried out with such uproar, like thunder quick to follow thunder. I am Agalaros, who was turned to stone. And then, to draw more near the poet, I moved to my right instead of moving forward. By now the air on every side was quiet, and he told me, that is the sturdy bit that should hold every man within his limits, but you would take the bait, so that the hook of the old adversary draws you to him, thus neither spur nor curb can serve to save you. Heaven would call, and it encircles you. It lets you see its never-ending beauties, and yet your eyes would only see the ground. Thus, he who sees all things would strike you down. Canto 15, Purgatorio. As many as the hours in which the sphere that's always playing like a child appears from daybreak to the end of the third hour, so many were the hours of light still left before the course of the day has reached sunset. Vespers were there, and where we are, midnight. When sunlight struck directly at our faces, we had circled so much of the mountain that we now headed straight into the west, that I could feel my vision overcome by radiance greater than I'd sensed before, and unaccounted things left me amaze. At which, that they might serve me as a shade, I lifted up my hands above my brow to limit some of that excessive splendor. As when a ray of light from water or a mirror leaps in the opposed direction and rises at an angle equal to its angle of descent. Don't I drop in some math lessons? And to each side of the distance from the vertical is equal, as science and experiment have shown. So did it seem to me that I had been struck there by light reflected, facing me, at which my eyes turned elsewhere rapidly. Kind father, what is that against which I have tried in vain, I said, to screen my eyes? It seems to move toward us. And he replied, Don't wonder if you are still dazzled by the family of heaven. A messenger has come, and he invites us to ascend. Soon in the sight of such things there will be no difficulty for you, but delight, as much as nature fashioned you to feel. No sooner had we reached the blessed angel than with glad voice he told us, Enter here. These are less steep than were the other stairs. We climbed, already past this point, behind us, when we heard Beati Miscriordes sung, and then Rejoice, you who have overcome. I and my master journeyed on alone, we two together, upward as we walked. I thought I'd gather profit from his words. And even as I turned towards him, I asked, what did that spirit of Ramanga meant? What he said, sharing cannot have a part. And his reply, he knows that harm that lies in his worst vice. If he chastises it, to ease his expiation, do not wonder. For when your longings center on things such that sharing them apportions less to each, then envy stirs the bellows of your sighs. But if the love within the highest sphere should turn your longings heavensward, the fear inhabiting your breast would disappear. For there, the more there are who would say ours, so much the greater is the good possessed by each. So much more love burns in that cloister. I am more hungry now for satisfaction, I said, than if I had held my tongue before. I housed a deeper doubt within my mind. How can a good that's shared by more possessors enable each to be more rich in it than if that good had been possessed by a few? And he to me, but if you still persist in letting your mind fix on earthly things, then even from true light you gather darkness. That good, ineffable and infinite, which is above, directs itself towards love, as light directs itself to polished bodies. Where ardor is, that good gives of itself, and where more love is, there that good confers a greater measure of eternal worth. And when there are more souls above who love, there's more to love well there, and they love more, and, mirror-like, each soul reflects the other. And if my speech has not appeased your hunger, you will see Beatrice. She will fulfill this and all other longings that you feel. Now only strive, so that the other 5 wounds may be cancelled quickly, as the 2 already are. The wound's contrition heals. But wanting then to say, you have appeased me, I saw that it had reached another circle, and my desiring eyes made me keep still. There I seemed suddenly to be caught up in an ecstatic vision, and to see some people in a temple, and a woman just at the threshold, in a gentle manner that mothers used, was saying, "Oh, my son, why have you done this to us? You can see how we have sought you, sorrowing, your father and I." At this point, as she fell still, what had appeared at first now disappeared. Then there appeared to me another woman, upon her cheeks the tears that grief distills when it is born of much scorn for another. She said, "If you are the ruler of that city, to name which even goddesses once vied, where every science has its had its source of light, revenge yourself on the presumptuous arms that embraced our daughter." O Pisistratus, and her lord seemed to me benign and mild, his aspect temperate, as he replied, "What shall we do to one who'd injured us? If one who loves us earns our condemnation." Next I saw people whom the fire of wrath had kindled, as they stoned a youth, and kept on shouting loudly to each other, "Kill! Kill! Kill!" I saw him now, weighed down by death, sink into the ground. Although his eyes were bent, always on heaven, they were heaven's gates, praying to his high lord, despite the torture, to pardon those who were his persecutors. His look was such that it unlocked compassion, and when my soul returned outside itself, and met the things outside it that are real, I then could recognize my not false errors. My guide, on seeing me behave as if I was a man who freed himself from sleep, said, "What is wrong with you? You can't walk straight for more than half a league, and now you have moved with clouded eyes and lurching legs, as if you were a man whom wine or sleep has gripped." "Oh, my kind father, if you hear me out, I'll tell you what appeared to me," I said, when I had lost the right use of my legs. And he, although you had 100 masks upon your face, that still will not conceal from me the thoughts you thought, however slight. What you have seen was shown, lest you refuse to open up your heart unto the waters of peace that pour from the eternal fountain. I did not ask what is wrong with you, as one who only sees with earthly eyes, which, once the body, stripped of soul, lies dead, can't see. I asked so that your feet might find more force. So must one urge the indolent, too slow to use their waking time when it returns. We made our way until the end of the Vespers, peering as far ahead as sight could stretch, at rays of light that, although late, were bright. But, gradually, smoke as black as night began to overtake us, and there was no place where we could have avoided it. The smoke deprived us of pure air and sight. Canto 16. Purgatorio. Darkness of hell, and of a night deprived of every planet, under meager skies as overcast by clouds as sky can be. It never served to veil my eyes so thickly, nor cover them with such rough-textured stuff as smoke that wrapped us here in purgatory. My eyes could not endure remaining open, so that my faithful, knowledgeable escort drew closer as he offered me his shoulder. Just as a blind man moves behind his guide, that he not stray or strike against something that may damage to, or even kill him. So I moved through the bitter, filthy air while listening to my guide, who kept repeating, "Take care that you are not cut off from me." But I heard voices, and each seemed to pray unto the Lamb of God, who takes away our sins for peace and mercy. Agnus Dei was sung repeatedly as their exordium. Words sung in such a way, in unison, that fullest concord seemed to be among them. Master, are those whom I hear, spirits? I asked him. You have grasped rightly, he replied. And as they go, they lose the knot of anchor. Then who are you whose body pierces through our smoke, who speak of us exactly like a man who uses months to measure time? A voice said this. Upon hearing it, my master turned round to me, replied to him, then asked if this way leads us to the upward path. And I, O creature whom, that you return fair unto him, who made you cleanse yourself, you shall hear wonders if you follow me. I'll follow you as far as I'm allowed, he answered, and if smoke won't let me see, hearing will serve instead to keep us linked. Then I began, with those same swaddling bands that death unwinds, I take my upward path. I have come here by way of hell's exactions, since God's so gathered me into his grace that he would have me, in a manner most unusual for moderns, to see his court. Do not conceal from me who you once were, before your death, and tell me if I go straight to the pass. Your words will be our escort. I was a Lombard, and I was called Marco. I knew the world's ways, and I loved those goods for which the bows of all men now grow slack. The way you've taken leads directly upward. So he replied, and then added, I pray you to pray for me when you're above. And to him, I pledge my faith to you, to do what you have asked, and yet a doubt will burst in me if it finds no way out. For my doubt was simple, but your statement has doubled it and made sure that I am right to couple your words with another's. The world indeed has been stripped utterly of every virtue, as you have said to me. It cloaks, and it is cloaked by perversity. Some place the cause in heaven, some below. But I beseech you to define the cause, that, seeing it, I may show it to others. A sigh from which his sorrow formed an "oh" was his beginning. Then he answered, "Brother, the world is blind, and you come from the world. You living ones continue to assign to heaven every cause, as if it were the necessary source of every motion. If this were so, then your free will be destroyed, and there would be no equity in joy for doing good, in grief for evil. The heavens set your appetites in motion, not all your appetites, but even if that were the case, you have received both light on good and evil, and free will, which though it struggle in its first wars with the heaven, then conquers all, if it has been well nurtured. On greater power and a better nature you, who are free, depend. That force engenders the mind in you outside the heavens' sway. Thus, if the present world has gone astray, in you is the cause. In you it's to be sought, and now I'll serve as your true exeget." Issuing from his hands, the soul, on which he thought with love before creating it, is like a child who weeps and laughs in sport. That soul is simple, unaware, but since a joyful maker gave it to motion, it turns willingly to things that bring delight. At first it savors trivial goods. These would beguile the soul, and it runs after them, unless there's a guide or rein to rule its love. Therefore, one needed law to serve as curb. A ruler, too, was needed, one who could discern at least the tower of the true city. The laws exist, but who applies them now? No one. The shepherd who precedes his flock can chew the cud, does not have cleft hooves, and thus the people, who can see their guide, snatch only at that good for which they feel some greed, would feed on that and seek no further. Misrule, you see, has caused the world to be malevolent. The cause is clearly not celestial forces. They do not corrupt. For Rome, which made the world good, used to have two suns, and they made visible two paths, the world's path and the pathway that is God's. Each has eclipsed the other. Now the sword has joined the shepherd's crook. The two together must of necessity result in evil. Because, so joined, one need not fear the other, and if you doubt me, watch the fruit and flower, for every plant is known by what it seeds. Within the territory watered by the adage and Poe, one used to find valor and courtesy. That is, before Frederick was met by strife. Now anyone ashamed of talking with the righteous or of meeting them can journey there, secure. True, 3 old men are there, in whom old times reprove the new. And they find God is slow in summoning them to a better life. Gerardo de Palazzo, good Gerardo, and Guido da Castel, whom it is better to call, as do the French, the candid Lombard. You can conclude the Church of Rome confounds 2 powers in itself. Into the filth it falls and fouls itself and its new burden. Good Marco, I replied, you reason well, and now I understand why Levi's sons were not allowed to share in the legacies. What Gerardo is this whom you mention as an example of the vanished people whose presence would reproach the savage age? Either your speech deceives me, or would tempt me, he answered them. For you, whose speech is Tuscan, seem to know nothing of the good Gerardo. There is no other name by which I know him, unless I speak of him as Gaia's father. God be with you. I have come with you no farther. You see the rays that penetrate the smoke already whitening. I must take leave. The angel has arrived, before he sees me. So he turned back, and would not hear me more. Sorry? Got a message. Alright. Canto 17, Purgatorio. Remember, reader, if you have ever been caught in the mountains by a mist through which you only saw as moles through their skin, how, when the thick, damp vapors once begin to thin, the sun's sphere passes feebly through them. Then your imagination will be quick to reach the point where it can see how I first came to see the sun again, when it was almost at the point at which it sets. So my steps matched my master's trusty steps. Out of that cloud I came, reaching the rays that, on the shores below, by now were spent. O fantasy, you that at times would snatch us so from outward things, we noticed nothing, although 1,000 trumpets sound around us. You who moves you when the senses do not spur you? A light that finds its form in heaven moves you, directly or led downward by God's will. Within my fantasy, I saw impressed the savagery of one who then, transformed, became the bird that most delights in song. At this, my mind withdrew to the within, to what imagining might bring. No thing that came from the without could enter in. Then into my deep fantasy there reigned one who was crucified, and as he died, he showed his savagery and his disdain. Oh God. Around him were great Asuras, and Esther, his wife, and the just Mordecai, whose saying and whose doing were so upright. And when this image shattered of itself, just like a bubble that lost the water beneath which it formed, there then rose up in my envisioning a girl who wept most bitterly and said, O Queen, why did you, in your wrath, desire to be no more? So, as to keep Lavinia, you killed yourself, and now you have lost me. I am she, mother, who mourns your fall before another's. Even as sleep is shattered when new light strikes suddenly against closed eyes, and, once it's shattered, gleams before it dies completely. So my imagination fell away as soon as light, more powerful than light we are accustomed to, beat on my eyes. I looked about to see where I might be, but when a voice said, Here one can ascend, then I abandoned every other intent. That voice made my will keen to see the one who'd spoken, with the eagerness that cannot be still until it faces what it wants. But even as the sun, become too strong, defeats our vision, veiling its own form, so there my power of sight was overcome. This spirit is divine, and though unasked, he would conduct us to the upward path. He hides himself with that same light he sheds. He does with us as men do with themselves, for he who sees a need but waits to be asked is already set on cruel refusal. Now, let our steps accept his invitation, and let us try to climb before dark falls. Then, until the day returns, we'll have to halt. So said my guide, and toward a stairway he and I, together, turned. And just as soon as I was at the first step, I sensed something, much like the motion of a wing, and wind that beat against my face, and words, Beati Pacifici, those free of evil anger. Beati Pacifici, those free of evil anger. Above us now, the final rays before the fall of night were raised to such a height that we could see the stars on every side. Oh, why, my strength, do you so melt away? I said within myself. because I felt the force within my legs compelled to halt. We had reached a point at which the upward stairs no longer climbed, and we were halted there, just like a ship when it had touched the shore. I listened for a while, hoping to hear whatever there might be in this new circle. Then I turned towards my master, asking him, "Tell me, my gentle father, what offense is purged within this circle we have reached? Although our feet must stop, your words need not." And he to me, "Precisely here, the love of good that is too tepidly pursued is mended. Here, the lazy oar plies harder. But so that you may understand more clearly, now turn your mind to me, and you will gather some useful fruit from our delaying here. My son, there is no creator and no creature who ever was without love, natural or mental, and you know that," he began. "The natural is always without error, but mental love may choose an evil object, or err through too much or too little vigor. As long as it's directed towards the first good, and tend towards secondary goods with measure, it cannot be the cause of evil pleasure. But when it twists towards evil, or attends to good with more or less care than it should, those whom he made have worked against their maker. From this, you see that, of necessity, love is the seed in you of every virtue and of all acts deserving punishment. Now, since love never turns aside its eyes from the well-being of its subject, things are surely free from hatred of themselves. And since no being can be seen as self-existing and divorced from the first being, each creature is cut off from hating him. Thus, if I have distinguished properly, ill love must mean to wish one's neighbor ill, and this love's born 3 ways in your clay. There's he who, through a abasement of another, hopes for supremacy. He only longs to see his neighbor's excellence cast down. Then there is one who, when he is outdone, fears his own loss of fame, power, honor, favor. His sadness loves misfortune for his neighbor. And there is he who, over injury received, resentful, for revenge grows greedy and angrily seeks out another's harm. This threefold love is expiated here below. I would have you understand the love that seeks the good distortedly. Each apprehends confusedly a good in which the mind may rest, and longs for it. And thus, all strive to reach that good. But if the love that urges you to know it, or to reach that good, is lax, this terrace, after just a repentance, punishes for that. There is a different good, which does not make men glad. It is not happiness. It is not true essence. Fruit and root of every good. The love that profligately yields to that is wept on in 3 terraces above us, but I'll not say which 3 shapes that love takes. May you seek those distinctions for yourself. Canto 18. Purgatorio. The subtle teacher had completed his discourse to me. Attentively he watched my eyes to see if I'd seemed satisfied, and I, still goaded by new thirst, was silent without. Although within, I said, perhaps I have displeased him with too many questions. But that true father, who had recognized the timid want I would not tell aloud, by speaking, gave me the courage to speak out. At which I said, "Master, my sight is so illuminated by your light, I recognize all your words, declare or analyze. Therefore I pray you, gentle father dear, to teach me what love is. You have reduced to love both each good and its opposite. He said, direct your intellect's sharp eyes towards me, and let the error of the blind who'd serve as guides be evident to you. The soul, which is created quick to love, responds to everything that pleases, just as soon as beauty wakens it to act. Your apprehension draws an image from a real object, and expands upon that object until soul has turned towards it. And if, so turned, the soul tends steadfastly, then that propensity, its love, its nature, that joins the soul in you anew through beauty. Then, just as flames ascend because the form of fire was fashioned to fly upward, towards the stuff of its own sphere, where it lasts longest, so does the soul, when seized, move into longing. A motion of the spirit, never resting till the beloved thing has made it joyous. Now you can plainly see how deeply hidden truth is from scrutinists who would insist that every love is, in itself, praiseworthy. And they are led to error by the matter of love, because it may seem always good. But not each seal is fine, although the wax is. Your speech and my own wit that followed it, I answered him, has shown me what love is. But that has filled me with still greater doubt. For if love's offered to us from without, and is the only foot with which soul walks, soul, going straight or crooked, has no merit. And he to me, what reason can see here, I can impart. Past that, for truth of faith, it's Beatrice alone you must await. Every substantial form, at once distinct from matter and conjoined to it, ingathers the force that is distinctively its own, a force unknown to us, until it acts. It's never shown except in its effects, just as green boughs display the life in plants. And thus man does not know it the source of his intelligence of primal notions and is tending towards towards desires primal objects. Both are in you, just as in bees there is the honey-making urge. Such primal will deserves no praise, and it deserves no blame. Now, that all other longings may conform to this first will, there is in you, inborn, the power that counsels, keeper of the threshold of your ascent. This is the principle on which your merit may be judged, for it garners and winnows good and evil longings. Those reasoners who reach the root of things learned of this inborn freedom. The bequest that, thus, they left unto the world is ethics. Even if we allow necessity as source for every love that flames in you, the power to curb that love is still your own. This noble power is what Beatrice means by free will. Therefore, remember it, if she should ever speak of it to you. The moon, with midnight now behind us, made the stars seem scarcer to us. It was shaped just like a copper basin, gleaming, new, and countercourse. It crossed those paths the sun ignites when those in Rome can see it. It set between the Corsicans and the Sardinians. That gracious shade from whom Pietola won more renown than any Mantuan town, that freed me from the weight of doubt I bore. So that I, having harvested his clear and open answers to my questions, stood, like one whom, nearing sleep, had random visitors. But readiness for sleep was suddenly taken from me by people who, behind our backs, had already turned in our direction. Just as of old, Ismenus and Asopus, at night, along their banks, saw crowds in clamor whenever Thebans had to summon Bacchus. Such was the arcing crowd that curved around the circle. Driven on, as I made out by righteous will, as well as by just love. Soon all that mighty throng drew near us, for they ran, and two in front of them, who wept, were crying. In her journey, Mary made haste to reach the mountain, and in order to conquer Lerida, first Caesar thrust against Marseille, and then to Spain he rushed. Following them, the others cried, "Quick, quick, lest time be lost through insufficient love. Where urge for good is keen, grace finds new green. O people in whom eager favor now may compensate for sloth and negligence, you showed in doing half-heartedly. He, who's alive, and surely I don't lie to you, would climb above as soon as he had seen the sun shed light on us again. Then tell us where the passage lies at hand." My guide said this. One of the souls replied, "Come follow us, and you will find the gap. We are so fully anxious to advance we cannot halt, and do forgive us, should you take our penance for discourtesy. I was Saint Zeno's abbot in Verona, under the rule of the valiant Barbarossa, of whom Milan still speaks with so much sorrow. And there is one with one foot in the grave, who soon will weep over that monastery, lamenting that he once had power there. Because, in place of its true shepherd, he put one who was unsound of body, and still more of mind, and born in sin, his son. I do not know if he had said more, or was silent. He had already raced so far beyond us, but I heard this much, and was pleased to hear it. And he who was my help in every need said, 'Turn around. See those two coming? They whose words mock sloth.' And I heard those two say behind all of the rest, 'The ones for whom the sea parted were dead before the Jordan saw those who had inherited its lands. And those who did not suffer trials until the end together went.' Anchises' son gave themselves up to a life without renown. Then, when those shades were so far up from us that seeing them became impossible, a new thought rose inside of me, and from that thought, still others, many and diverse, were born. I was so drawn from random thought to that, wandering in mind, I shut my eyes, transforming thought on thought to dream. Canto 19, Purgatorio. In that hour when the heat of day, defeated by Earth, and sometimes Saturn, can no longer warm up the moon-sent cold, when geomancers can, in the east, see their Fortuna Major rising before the dawn, along a path that will be darkened for only briefly, a stammering woman came to me in a dream. Her eyes askew and crooked on her feet. Her hands were crippled, her complexion sallow. I looked at her, and just as sun revives cold limbs that night made dumb, so did my gaze loosen her tongue, and then, in little time, set her contorted limbs in perfect order. And, when the coloring that love prefers, my eyes transformed the wanness of her features. And when her speech had been set free, then she began to sing so that it would have been most difficult for me to turn aside. "I am," she sang, "I am the pleasing siren who at mid-sea land mariners astray. There is so much delight in hearing me. I turned aside Ulysses, although he had longed to journey, who grows used to me, seldom departs. I satisfy him so. Her lips were not done yet. Her lips were not yet done when, there beside me, a woman showed herself, alert and saintly, to cast the siren into much confusion. "Oh, Virgil, Virgil, tell me, who is this?" she asked most scornfully, and he came forward, his eyes intent upon that honest tone. He seized the other, barring her in front, tearing her clothes and showing me her belly. The stench that came from there awakened me. I moved my eyes, and my good master cried, "At least 3 times I've called you. Rise and come. Let's find the opening where you may enter." I rose. The daylight had already filled the circles of the sacred mountain. We were journeying, with new sun at our back. I followed him, burying my brow like one whose thoughts have weighed him down, who bends as if he were the same semi-arch that forms a bridge. And then I heard, "Draw near, the pass is here," and said in a manner so benign and gentle as in our mortal land one cannot hear. He who addressed us so had opened his wings, white as a swan's, and he directed us upwards between 2 walls of the hard rock. And then he moved his plumes, and, fanning us, affirmed those qui lugent would be blessed. Lugent? Lugent? Their souls would be possessed of consolation. "What makes you keep your eyes upon the ground?" my guide began to say to me when both of us had climbed a little past the angel. And I, "What makes me move with such misgiving is a new vision. It has so beguiled me that I cannot relinquish the thoughts of it." "The one you saw," he said, "that ancient witch. For her alone one must atone above. You saw how man can free himself from her. Let that suffice, and hurry on your way. Fasten your eyes upon the lure that's spun by the eternal king with his great spheres. Just like a falcon who at first looked down, then, when the falconer is called, bends forward, craving the food that's ready for him there. And so I became, and so remained until, through the cleft rock that lets one climb above, I reached that point at which the circle starts. When I was in the clearing, the 5th level, my eyes discovered people there who wept, lying upon the ground, all turned face down. "Adhecit pavimento anima mea," I heard them say with sighs so deep that it was hard to comprehend the words they spoke. "O God's elect, whose sufferings both hope and justice made life difficult, direct us to the stairway meant for our ascent. If you come here but do not need to be prostrate, and you would find the path most quickly, then keep your right hand always to the outside." So did the poet ask, so did I reply. So did reply come from a little ways ahead. And I, hearing that voice reply, learned what was hidden. I turned my eyes to find my master's eyes at this. With a glad sign, he ratified what I had asked for with my eager eyes. When free to do so as I had wanted to, I moved ahead and bent over that soul whose words before had made me notice him, saying, "Spirit, within whom weeping ripens, that without which there's no return to God, suspend a while, for me, your greater care. Tell me, who were you, and why are your backs turned up? And there, where I, alive, set out, would you have me beseech some good for you?" And he to me, "Why heaven turns our backs against itself, you are to know, but first, Scias quod ego fui successor petri. Between Sestri and Chiavari descends a handsome river, and its name is set upon the upper portion of my crest. For 1 month and a little more I learned how great mantle weighs on him who'd kept it out of the mire. All other weights seemed feathers. Alas, how tardy my conversion was! But when I had been named the Roman shepherd, Then I discovered this deceit of life. I saw that there the heart was not at rest, nor could I, in that life, ascend more high, so that in me love for this life was kindled. Until that point I was a squalid soul, from God divided, wholly avaricious. Now, as you can see, I'm punished here for that. What avarice enacts is here declared in the purgation of converted souls. The mountain has no punishment more bitter. Just as we did not lift our eyes on high, but set our sight on earthly things instead, so justice here impels our eyes down towards earth. As avarice annulled in the love of any other good, as avarice annulled in us the love of any other good, and thus we lost our chances for the righteous works, so justice here fetters our hands and feet and holds us captive. And for as long as it may please our just Lord, here we'll be outstretched and motionless. I had kneeled, wishing to speak, but just as I began, through my voice alone, he sensed I had meant to do him reverence. "What reason makes you bend your body so?" he said. And I to him, "Your dignity made conscious, sting me as I stood erect. Brother, straighten your legs, rise up," he answered. "Don't be mistaken. I, with you and others, am but a fellow servant of one power. If you have ever understood the holy sound of the gospel that says, Neque nubent, then you will see why I have spoken so. Now go your way. I'll not have you stop longer. Your staying here disturbs my lamentations. The tears that help me ripen what you mentioned. Beyond I have a niece whose name Agalia. Alagia. She in herself is good. As long as our house, by example, brings her not to evil. And she alone is left to me beyond." Hold on, give me 1 second. I just really like that passage. I want to save it. Your staying here disturbs my lamentations. Canto 20, Purgatorio. Against a better will, the will fights weakly. Therefore, to please him, though against my pleasure, I drew my unquenched sponge out of the water. I moved on, and my guide moved through the unencumbered space, hugging the rock as one walks on a wall, close to the battlements. For those whose eyes would melt down, drop by drop, the evil that possesses all the world were too close to the edge, on the far side. May you be damned, O ancient wolf, whose power can claim more prey than all the other beasts. Your hungering is deep and never-ending. O heavens, through whose revolutions may think the things on earth are changed, when will he come, the one whose works will drive that wolf away? Our steps were short and slow as we moved on. I was attentive to the shades. I heard the sorrows in their tears and lamentations. Then I, by chance, heard one ahead of us crying in his lament. The sweet Mary, as a woman would outcry in labor pains. And he continued, "In that hostel where you had set down your holy burden, there one can discover just how poor you were." Following this I heard, "O good Fabricius, you chose as your possessions indigence, not indignus. indigence, in, indiges, indin, with virtue rather than much wealth, with vice. These words have been so pleasing to me, I moved forward so that I may come to know the spirit from whom they have seemed. Oh, excuse me. The spirit from whom they had seemed to come. He kept on speaking, telling the largesse of Nicholas, the gifts that he gave the maidens so that they may be honorably wed. O soul who speaks of so much righteousness, do tell me who you were, I said, and why just you alone renew these seemly praises. Your speaking to me will not go unthanked. When I return to finish the short span of life which now hurries toward its end, and I'll tell you, not because I hope for solace from your world, but for such grace as shines in you before your deaths arrived. I was the root of the obnoxious plant that overshadows all the Christian lands, so that fine fruit can rarely rise from them. But if Dowai and Lily, But if Douai and Lille and Bruges and Ghent had power, they would soon take vengeance on it, and this I beg of him who judges all. The name I bore beyond was Hugh Capet. Of me were born in the Louises and Philips, by whom France had been ruled most recently. I was the son of a Parisian butcher, when all the line of ancient kings was done, and only one, a monk in grey, survived. I found the reins that ruled the kingdom tight with my hands, and I held so much new-gained power, and possessed so many friends that, to the widowed crown, my own son's head was elevated, and from him began the consecrated bones of all those kings. Until the giant dowry of Providence removed all sense of shame within my house, my land was not worth much, but it did no wrong. There its rapine began with lies and force, and then it seized, that it might make amends. Ponthieu and Normandy and Gascogne. Charles came to Italy and, for amends, made Conradin a victim, and then thrust back Thomas into heaven for amends. I see a time, not too far off, in which another Charles advances out of France to make himself and his descendants famous. He does not carry weapons when he comes, only the lance that Judas tilted. This he couches so, he twists the paunch of Florence. From this he'll gain not land, just shame and sin, which will be all the heavier for him, as he would reckon lightly such disgrace. The other, who once left his ship as a prisoner, I see him sell his daughter, bargaining as pirates haggle over female slaves. O avarice, my house is now your captive. It traffics in the flesh of its own children. What more is left for you to do to us? That past and future evil may seem less. I see the fleur-de-lis enter Anaghi, and his vicar, Christ made prisoner. I see him mocked a second time. I see the vinegar and gall renewed, and he is slain between two thieves who are still alive. And I see the new pilot, one so cruel that, still not sated, he, without decree, carries his greedy sails into the temple. O you, my lord, when you will let me be happy on seeing vengeance that, concealed, makes sweet your anger and your secrecy. What I have said about the only bride, the Holy Ghost is known, the words that made you turn to me for commentary. These words serve as answer to our prayers as long as it is day. But when night falls, then we recite examples that are contrary. Then we tell we tell over how Pygmalion, out of his greedy lust for gold, became a thief and traitor and a parricide? The wretchedness of avaricious Midas, resulting from a ravenous request, the consequence that always makes men laugh. And each of us recalls the foolish Achan, how he had robbed the spoils, so that the anger of Joshua still seems to sting him there. Then we accuse Sapphira and her husband. We praise the kicks Heliodorus suffered on Polymnestor, who killed Polydorus, resounds in infamy round all this mountain. And finally, we cry here is, Crassus, tell us, because you know, how does gold taste? At times one speaks aloud, another low, according to the sentiment that goads us now to be more swift and now more slow. Thus I was not alone in speaking of the good we sight by day, but here, nearby, no other spirit raised his voice as high. We had already taken leave of him, and were already struggling to advance along the road as far as we are able, when I could feel the mountain tremble like a falling thing, at which a chill seized me, as cold grips one who goes to meet his death. Delos had surely not been buffeted so hard before Latona planted there the nest in which to bear the sky's two eyes. Then such a shout rose up on every side that, drawing near to me, my master said, "Don't be afraid. As long as I am your guide, Gloria in excelsis Deo," they all cried. So did I understand from those nearby, whose shouted words were able to be heard. Just like the shepherds who first heard that song, we stood but did not move, in expectation until the trembling stopped. The song was done. Then we took up again our holy path, watching the shades who lay along the ground, who had resumed their customary tears. My ignorance had never struggled so, has never made me long so much to know, if memory does not mislead me now. As it seemed then too long within my thoughts, nor did I dare to ask. We were so rushed, nor by myself could I discern the cause. So timid, passive, I pursued my way. Canto 21, Purgatorio. The natural thirst that never can be quenched, except by the water that gives grace. The draught of the simple woman of Semireth sought. The draught tormented me, hastened, spurred me onto the path, crowded with souls behind my guide, and I felt pity, though their pain was justified. And here, even as Luke records for us, that Christ, new risen from his burial cave, appeared to along his way. A shade appeared, and he advanced behind our backs while we were careful not to trample on the outstretched crowds. Excuse me, I'm getting hiccups. We did not notice him until he had addressed us with, "God give you, O my brothers, peace." We turned at once, and then after offering suitable response, Virgil began. And what a bad time to get hiccups. Let me take a quick bio break. I'm going to see if I can't deal with this. I'll be back in a sec. Alright, hiccup situation seemed to have been sorted. Thank you for your patience. I think I was actually halfway. What? He exclaimed, as we moved forward quickly. If God's not deemed you worthy of ascent, who has guided you so far along his stairs? If you observe the signs the angel traced upon this man, you'll see plainly he's meant to reign with all the righteous. But since she who spins night and day had not yet spun the wool of that Clotho sits upon the distaff, and is just for everyone, his soul, the sister of your soul and mine, in its ascent, could not, alone, have climbed here. For it does not see the way we see. Therefore, I was brought forth from hell's broad jaws to guide him in his going. I shall lead him just as far as where I can reach, where I teach can reach. But tell me, if you can, why, just before the mountain shook and shouted, all of it, for so it seemed, down to its sea-bathed core, this question threaded so the needle's eye of my desire that just the hope alone of knowing left my thirst more satisfied. That other shade began. The sanctity of these slopes does not suffer anything that's without order or uncustomary. This place is free from every perturbation. But heaven from itself and in itself receives may serve as cause here, nothing else. Therefore, no rain, no hail, no snow, no dew, no hoarfrost falls here any higher than the stairs of entry with their 3 brief steps. Neither thick clouds nor thin appear, nor flash of lightning. Thaumas's daughter, who so often shifts places in your world, is absent here. Dry vapor cannot climb up any higher than to the top of the 3 steps of which I spoke, where Peter's vicar plants his feet. Vicar. Below that point, there may be small or ample tremors, but here above, I know not why, no wind concealed in earth has ever caused a tremor, for it only trembles here when some soul feels it's cleansed, so that it rises or stirs to climb on high, and that shout follows. The will alone is proof of purity, and, fully free, surprises soul into a change of dwelling place, effectively. Soul had the will to climb before, but that will was opposed by longing to do penance, as once to sin, instilled by divine justice. And I, who have lain in the suffering 500 years and more, just now have felt my free will for a better threshold. Thus you heard the earthquake, and the pious spirits throughout the mountain, as they praised the Lord, and may he send them speedily upwards. So did he speak to us, and just as joy is greater when we quench a greater thirst, the joy he brought cannot be told in words. And my wise guide, I now can see the net impeding you, how one slips through, and why it quakes here, and what makes you all rejoice. And now may it please you to tell me who you were, and in your words may I find why you've lain here for so many centuries. In that age when the worthy Titus, with the help from the highest king, avenged the wounds from which the blood that Judas sold had flowed, I had a sufficient fame beyond, that spirit replied. I bore the name that lasts the longest and honors most, but faith was not yet mine. So gentle was the spirit of my verse that Rome drew me, son of Tullus, to her. And there my brow deserved a crown of myrtle. On earth my name is still remembered. Stadius. I sang of Thebes, and then of the great Achilles. I fell along the way of that last labor. The sparks that warmed me, the seeds of my ardor, were from the holy fire, the same that gave more than 1,000 poets light and flame. I speak of the Aeneid. When I wrote verse, it was mother to me. It was nurse. My work, without it, would not weigh an ounce. And to have lived on earth when Virgil lived, for that I would extend by 1 more year the time I owe before my exile's end. These words made Virgil turn to me, and as he turned, his face, through silence, said, "Be still, and yet the power of will cannot do all." Hey, Punky, glad to see you. For tears and smiles are both so faithful to the feelings that have prompted them that true feeling escapes the will that would subdue. Mass Builder? I have never heard of that. What is that game? A game? Experience? Deck demo? But I smiled like a man whose eyes would signal at this. The shade was silent, and he stared where sentiment is clearest at my eyes, and said, "So may your trying labor end successfully. Do tell me why. Just now your face showed me the flashing of a smile." "Now I am held by one side and the other. One keeps me still, the other conjures me to speak. But when, therefore, I sigh, my masters know why, and tells me, 'Do not be afraid to speak, but speak and answer what he has asked you to tell him with such earnestness.'" Ah, there it goes. The Barton voice. I don't know what a Barton voice is. Also, I don't know what the Mass Builder is. Also, thank you for the raid, Punky. I'm guessing you got hit with an ad, so I apologize. I have no control over it. At this I answered, "Ancient Spirit, you perhaps are wondering at the smile I smiled. But I would have you feel still more surprise. Baritone. Oh, okay. Gotcha. I thought you were calling me like some kind of actor or something. He who is guide, who leads my eyes on high, is that same Virgil from whom you derived the power to sing of men and of the gods. Do not suppose my smile had any source beyond the speech you spoke, but sure, be sure, it was those words you said of him that were the cause." Now he had to bend to kiss my teacher's feet, but Virgil told him, "Brother, there is no need. You are a shade. The shade is what you see." And rising, "Now you can understand how much love burns in me for you, when I forget our insubstantiability. Insubstantiality. There we go. Treating the shades as one treats solid things." Sorry, I gotta... ASMR is surprisingly taxing on the throat, so you gotta hydrate after every canto. Canto 22. Purgatorio. The angel now was left behind us. He who had directed us to the 6th terrace, having erased one P that scarred my face. He had declared that those who longed for justice are blessed, and his voice concluded that message with "Sitiunt," without rest. Now the Latin and Italian is going to be the death of me. And while I climbed behind the 2 swift spirits, not laboring at all, for I was lighter than I had been along the other stairs, Virgil began. "Love that is kindled by virtue will, in another, find reply, as long as that love's flame appears without. So from the time when Juvenal, descending among us in hell's limbo, had made plain the fondness that you felt for me, my own benevolence toward you had been much richer than any ever given to a person one has not seen. Thus, now these stairs seem short. But tell me, and as friend, forgive me if excessive candor lets my reins relax. and, as a friend, exchange your words with me. Oh, Virgil thinks Dante's a friend now. Virgil is Dante's best friend. How was it that you found within your breast a place for avarice, when you possessed the wisdom you had nurtured with such care? These words at first brought something of a smile to Statius. Then he answered, "Every word you speak to me is a dear sign of love. Indeed, because true causes are concealed, we often face deceptive reasoning, and things provoke perplexity in us. Your question makes me sure that you're convinced, perhaps because my circle was the fifth, that, in the life I once lived, avarice had been my sin. Know then that I was far from avarice. It was my lack of measure thousands of months have punished. And if I had not corrected my assessment by my understanding what your verses meant when you, as if enraged by human nature, exclaimed, 'Why cannot you, O holy hunger for gold, restrain the appetite of mortals?' I'd now, while rolling weights, no sorry jousts. Then I became aware that hands might open too wide, like wings in spreading and spending, and of this, and of my other sins, I did repent. How many are to rise again with heads cropped close, whom ignorance prevents from reaching repentance and at the end of life? And know that when a sin is countered by another fault, directly opposite to it, then here both sins see their green wither. Thus I joined to pay for avarice in my purgation. Though what brought me here was prodigality, as opposite. Now when you sang the savage wars of those twin sorrows of Jocasta, said the singer of the bucolic poems, it does not seem from those notes struck by you and Sleo there, that you had yet turned faithful to the faith, without which righteous works do not suffice. If that is so, then what sun or what candles drew you from that darkness, so that, in their wake, you set your sails beyond the fishermen? And he to them, "You were the first to send me to drink with Parnassus's caves, and you, the first after God, enlightened me. You did as he who goes by night and carries the lamp behind him. He is of no help to his own self, but teaches those who follow. When you declared, 'The ages are renewed, justice and man's first time on earth return, from heaven a new progeny descends.' Through you I was a poet, and, through you, a Christian. But that you may see more plainly, I'll set my hand to color what I sketch. Disseminated by the messengers of the eternal kingdom, the true faith by then had penetrated all the world. The new preachers preached in such accord with what you said, and I have such repeated, that I was drawn into frequenting them. Then they appeared to me to be so saintly that when Domitian persecuted them, Domitian persecuted them, my own laments accompanied their grief. And while I could, as long as I had life, I helped them. Their honest practices made me disdainful of all the other sects. Before, within my poem, I had led the Greeks into the stream of Thebes. I was baptized, but out of fear I was a secret Christian, and, for a long time, showed myself as pagan. For this half-heartedness, for more than 4 centuries, I circled the 4th circle. And now may you, who lifted up the lid that hid from the ground, that hid from me the good of which I speak, while time has left us as we climb, tell me, where is our ancient terrace? And Caecilius? And Plautus? Those Various, if you know. Tell me if they are damned, and in what quarter. All these and Perseus, I and many others, my guide replied, are with that Greek to whom the muses gave their gifts in greatest measure. Our place is the blind prison, its first circle, and there we often talk about the mountain, where those who were our nurses always dwell. Euripides is with us, and Typhon, Simonides, Agathon as well, and many other Greeks who once wore laurel upon their brow, and there of your own people. One sees Antigone, Deiphile, Ismene, sad still, Argia as she was. There one can see the woman who showed Langia, and there Tiresias' daughter, where there is Thetis, and with her sisters there. Deidamia. Never mind, Greek. Greek is awful. Greek names are tricky. Both poets now were silent once again, intent on their surroundings. They were free of stars and stairs and walls. With day's first 4 handmaidens already left behind, and with the 5th guiding the chariot pole and lifting it, so that its horn of flame rose always higher. My master said, I think it's time that we turn our right shoulders towards the terrace's edge, circling the mountain in the way we're used to. In this way, habit served us as a banner, and when we chose that path, our fear was less, because that worthy soul gave his assent. Those 2 were in the lead. I walked alone, behind them, listening to their colloquy, which taught me much concerning poetry. But their delightful conversation soon was interrupted by a tree that blocked our paths. Its fruits were fine, their scents sweet. And even as a fir tree tapers upward from branch to branch, that tree there tapered downward, so as, I think, to ward off any climber. Upon our left, where a wall enclosed our path, bright running water fell from the high rock, and spread itself upon the leaves above. When the 2 poets had approached the tree, a voice, emerging from within the leaves, cried out, This food shall be denied to you. Then it cried, Mary's care was for the marriage, feasts being seemly and complete, not for her mouth, which would now intercede for you. And when they drank of old, the Roman women were satisfied with water, and young Daniel, through his disdain of food, acquired wisdom. The first age was as fair as gold, when hungry men found the taste of acorns good, when thirsty they found that every little stream was nectar. When he was in the wilderness, the Baptist had fed on nothing more than honey, locusts. For this he was made great, as glorious as in the gospel is made plain to you. All right, final canto, let's go. One more hydrate. Canto 23, Purgatorio. While I was peering so intently through the green boughs, like a hunter who, so used, would waste his life in chasing after birds, my more than father said to me, Now come, son, for the time our journey can permit is to be used more fruitfully than this. I turned my eyes, and I was no less quick to turn my steps. I followed those 2 sages, whose talk was such my going brought no loss. And there, Labi mea, Domine, was wept and sung, and I heard in such a manner that it gave birth to both delight and sorrow. O gentle father, what is this I hear? I asked, and he, perhaps they're shades who go loosening the knot of what they owe, even as pensive pilgrims do, who when they've overtaken folk unknown to them along the way, will turn, but will not stop. So, overtaking us, they have come from behind, but were more swift. A crowd of souls, devout and silent, looked at us in wonder. Each shade had dark and hollow eyes. Their faces were pale and so emaciated that their taut skin took its shape from bones beneath. I don't believe that even Eryskithon had been so dried down to his very hide by hunger, when his fast made him fear most. Thinking, I told myself, I see the people who had lost Jerusalem, when Mary plunged her or beacon to her sun. The orbits of their eyes seemed like a ring that lost its gems, and he who, in the face of man, would read Omo, would here have recognized the M. Who if he would not know? Who if he knew not how, would he have believed that longing born from odor of a tree, odor of water, could reduce souls so? I was already wondering what had so famished them, or had not yet learned the reason for their leanness and sad scurf. When there, a shade, his eyes deep in his head, turned towards me, staring steadily, and then he cried aloud, "What grace is granted me! I never would have recognized him by his face, and yet his voice made plain to me what his appearance had obliterated. This spark rekindled in me everything I knew about those altered features, and thus I realized it was Foresi's face. Don't reproach me for the dried-out scabs that stained my skin," he begged, "nor for the lack of flesh on me. But do tell me the truth about yourself. Do tell me who those two souls there are, those who are escorting you. May you not keep yourself from speaking to me? Your face, which I once wept on when you died," I answered him, "now gives me no less cause for sad lament, seeing you so deformed. But tell me, for God's sake, what has unleaved you so? Don't make me speak while I'm amazed." He who is distracted answers clumsily. And he to me, from the eternal council, the water and the tree left behind, receive the power that makes me waste away. All of those souls who, grieving, sing because their appetite was gluttonous, in thirst and hunger here re-sanctify themselves. The fragrance of fruit and of the water that sprayed through the green tree kindles in us craving for food and drink. And not once only, as we go round this space, are pains renewed. I speak of pain, but I should speak of solace, for we are guided to those trees by that same longing that had guided Christ when he had come to free us through the blood he shed, and, in his joyousness, called out, "Eli." And I told to him, "Forsy, from that day when you exchanged the world for a better life until now, less than 5 years have revolved. And if you waited for the moment when the power to sin was gone before you found the hour of the good grief that succors us and weds us once again to God, how have you come so quickly here? I thought to find you down below, where time must pay for time." And he said to me, "It is my Nella who, with her abundant tears, had guided me to drink the sweet wormwood of torments. She, with sighs and prayers devout, had set me free of this slope, where one waits, and has freed me from circles underneath the circle. She, my gentle widow, who I loved most dearly, was all the more beloved and prized by God, as she is more alone in her good works. For even the Barbagia of Sardinia is far more modest in its women than the Barbagia where I left her. Oh, sweet brother, what would you have me say? What would you have had me say? A future's time's already visible to me, a time not too far off from now, when from the pulpit it shall be forbidden to those immodest ones, Florentine women, to go on displaying bosoms with bare paps. Not the bosoms. What ordinances, spiritual, civil, were ever needed by barbarian or Saracen woman to make them go covered? But if those shameless ones had certain knowledge of what swift heaven's readying for them, they would not have mouths now. Then they would have mouths open now to howl. For if our foresight here does not deceive me, they will be sad before the cheeks of those whom lullabies can now appease grow beards. Ah, brother, do not hide things any longer. You see that I'm not alone. For all these people stare at where you veil the sun. I said this to him. If you should call to mind what you have been with me, and I with you, remembering now will still be heavy. He who precedes me turned me from that life some days ago, when she who is the sister of him, pointed to the sun, was showing her roundness to you. It is he who's led me through the deep night of the truly dead, with this true flesh that follows after him. His help has drawn me up from there, climbing and circling round this mountain, which makes straight you whom the world made crooked. And he says that he will bear me company until I reach the place where Beatrice is. There I must remain without him. It is Virgil who speaks to me in this way, and I pointed to him. The other is the shade from whom, just now, your kingdom caused its every slope to tremble as it has freed him from itself. And we will leave off Canto 24 for next week.